In the early 20th century, the world witnessed the creation of the most magnificent and supposedly unsinkable ship ever built, the RMS Titanic. It was a symbol of luxury and opulence, a floating palace that promised a voyage unlike any other. The Titanic and its sister ships, the RMS Olympic and HMHS Britannic, were constructed as part of a competitive and ambitious effort by the White Star Line and other shipping companies to establish dominance in the transatlantic passenger liner industry during the early 20th century. There were several key reasons why the Titanic came into being. The early 20th century saw intense competition among shipping companies, particularly between the White Star Line and its main rival, Cunard Line. Building ever larger and more luxurious ships was seen as a way to attract wealthy passengers and gain prestige. There was a growing demand for transatlantic travel between Europe and North America due to immigration, trade, and tourism. Larger and more comfortable ships were needed to accommodate the increasing number of passengers. Advances in shipbuilding technology, particularly the use of steel instead of iron for the hull and the implementation of advanced safety features, made it possible to build larger and safer vessels. The Titanic was designed to offer the utmost in luxury and comfort to its passengers. It was equipped with grand dining rooms, luxurious cabins, and lavish amenities, setting a new standard for ocean travel. The Titanic was part of the Olympic-class trio of ships, which also included the RMS Olympic and the HMHS Britannic. These sister ships were intended to be the largest and most opulent liners of their time, with each outdoing the other in terms of luxury and size. The construction and launch of the Titanic generated immense public interest and garnered extensive media coverage. The ship's maiden voyage was highly anticipated, and its name became synonymous with opulence and innovation. The Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage on April 10, 1912, from Southampton, England. It was a crisp spring day, and a sense of excitement and anticipation filled the air as the massive ship prepared to embark on its journey across the Atlantic Ocean. On board the Titanic were approximately 2,224 passengers and crew members. The ship was divided into three classes: first class, second class, and third class, also known as steerage. Among the passengers were some of the wealthiest and most influential people of the time, along with immigrants seeking a new life in America. The Titanic was renowned for its opulent interiors and luxurious amenities. Passengers in first class enjoyed grand dining rooms, spacious cabins, and access to amenities like a gymnasium, a swimming pool, a Turkish bath, and a stunning grand staircase. As the Titanic prepared to set sail, there was a departure ceremony attended by passengers and well-wishers. The ship's band played music, and the mood was festive and celebratory. Thousands of people lined the docks to catch a glimpse of the magnificent ship. The Titanic's destination was New York City, and it was scheduled to make stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, now known as Cobh, Ireland, before crossing the Atlantic Ocean. It was expected to arrive in New York on April 17, 1912. The Titanic was promoted as unsinkable due to its advanced safety features, including watertight compartments and an extensive supply of lifeboats. Passengers and crew were reassured by the ship's reputation for safety and luxury. The condition of the ocean on the night of April 14, 1912, when the Titanic struck an iceberg, was quite calm and clear. The weather that night was exceptionally clear with a starry sky, which made it easier to spot potential obstacles, including icebergs, on the water. The water temperature was bitterly cold due to the ship's location in the North Atlantic Ocean. The cold water would prove to be a significant danger to those who ended up in the water after the collision. The Titanic's crew had received multiple iceberg warnings throughout the day, both from other ships and through radio communication. However, the ship's speed was not significantly reduced until it was too late. The Titanic was on its maiden voyage, heading westward across the North Atlantic from Southampton, England, to New York City, USA. At approximately 11:40 p.m. ship's time on April 14, 1912, the Titanic was sailing through calm, clear waters in the North Atlantic. The night was cold and moonless, with a clear starry sky. Lookout Frederick Fleet, stationed in the Crow's Nest, spotted an iceberg directly ahead. He immediately rang the warning bell and alerted the bridge. First Officer William Murdoch, who was in charge of the bridge at that moment, ordered the ship to be steered hard to port, left, and the engines to be put in reverse to slow down the Titanic and attempt to avoid the collision. Despite these maneuvers, the Titanic struck the iceberg on its starboard, right, side. The iceberg's impact caused a series of holes below the waterline on the starboard side, leading to flooding in several of the ship's watertight compartments. The initial damage assessment was not fully understood by the crew at first, and there was a degree of disbelief about the seriousness of the situation. The Titanic's crew quickly started to close watertight doors and launch distress signals, alerting nearby ships to their dire situation. The collision with the iceberg caused significant damage to the Titanic. Several of its watertight compartments were breached, and the ship began taking on water. The ship's design was such that it could stay afloat with a flooding of up to 4 compartments, but the iceberg had damaged more than that. This design flaw contributed to the ship's eventual sinking. As the Titanic continued to fill with water, its bow gradually sank lower, causing the stern to rise out of the water. Approximately 2.5 hours after the collision, the Titanic broke in two due to the stress on its weakened structure. The stern section remained afloat for a short time before sinking as well. The situation during the sinking of the Titanic and the subsequent rescue efforts were characterized by chaos, heroism, and tragedy. Here's a detailed account of what transpired during these critical moments. After the Titanic struck the iceberg on the night of April 14, 1912, there was initial confusion and disbelief among passengers and crew. Some did not realize the severity of the situation. As the ship's condition worsened, the crew began launching lifeboats. However, there were not enough lifeboats for all passengers and crew on board, and many lifeboats were launched with empty seats. The "women and children first" protocol was followed, prioritizing their evacuation onto lifeboats. Passengers in first class were generally given priority access to lifeboats, while those in third class, steerage, often faced delays and difficulties in reaching the lifeboats. As the Titanic continued to take on water, the bow of the ship sank lower, causing the stern to rise. Passengers and crew on board faced the horrifying spectacle of the ship breaking in two before sinking. The Titanic sent out distress signals, including CQD, an early radio distress call, and SOS, alerting nearby ships to their plight. The closest ship, the RMS Carpathia, received the distress call and immediately steamed toward the Titanic's location. The Carpathia arrived at the scene approximately 2 hours after the Titanic's sinking. By this time, many passengers who had been in the lifeboats were suffering from exposure to the cold water. Carpathia's crew and passengers assisted in rescuing survivors from lifeboats. They pulled survivors on board and provided them with warm clothing, blankets, and medical care. Despite the rescue efforts, the majority of those on board the Titanic who ended up in the water succumbed to hypothermia due to the frigid North Atlantic temperatures. Over 1,500 lives were lost. The survivors on board Carpathia and other rescue vessels were faced with the grim reality of the disaster. They mourned the loss of loved ones and were brought to New York City, where they were met by grieving relatives and a shocked public. The sinking of the Titanic was a public relations disaster for White Star Line. The company's reputation was severely damaged, as the Titanic had been marketed as unsinkable, and was considered the epitome of luxury and safety. The disaster shattered the confidence of the traveling public. White Star Line and IMM faced numerous legal challenges in the aftermath of the disaster. Lawsuits were filed by survivors and the families of victims seeking compensation for their losses. The company had to navigate complex legal proceedings and settlements. The sinking of the Titanic had a profound and lasting impact on the shipping industry, leading to important reforms and changes in safety standards. While it was a devastating event for White Star Line and its owners, they continued to operate in the years following the disaster, albeit with a heightened focus on safety and public relations. The Titanic's legacy endures, reminding us of the need for humility, caution, and vigilance when exploring and navigating the natural world's wonders and challenges.